Kiros.
Right. Thank you.
Hey, Max,
Yeah. Yes.
that date on minutes, is it February 15th, not the 25th, right?
It was January 25th. I think there was a February.
Okay,
Sorry, I'm hearing there's a February finance meeting.
okay, thank you.
Sorry, I got the YouTube stream is up and running, and I was hearing myself back. But we are up and running on YouTube, Chair Hart, so we're ready when you are. When we get to 12:30.
Okay, thank you. Two-minute warning. Everybody ready? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hereby call this remote meeting of the Washington Metrorail Safety Commission to order. This meeting is being recorded as well as streamed live for the public. Mr. Smith, do we have a quorum today?
Yes, sure. All right. We have a quorum. You're present. Vice Chair Hall is present. Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke is present. Commissioner Rush is present. Commissioner Al-Khatib and alternate Commissioner Lobby are present.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. We will start today with our safety message from the Washington Metrorail Safety Commission's Emergency Management Specialist, Richard David. Richard?
Thank you, Chair Hart. When entering the Metrorail system, hold the handrails when using the stairs or the escalator. If you're in a wheelchair, pushing a stroller, or walking a bike, use the elevator. When on a platform, make sure you stand back from the platform edge until the train is fully stopped. If you drop anything on the tracks, always contact a Metro employee for assistance. Do not enter the tracks for any reason. Please stay informed, stay healthy, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David. We will now move on to the minutes from our last meeting. Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. The minutes of the January 25th, 2022 meeting were posted for your review. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I move approval of the January 25th minutes as circulated. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Hall has seconded the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
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 Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
The vote is 5-0. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Moving to the next item on our agenda, we provide an opportunity for public comments at each of our meetings. And we will now ask if any members of the public who have joined our Zoom webinar would like to speak. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom and our staff will unmute one person at a time. Each person will have a maximum of 2 minutes. I will pause now to see if we have any public comments. While we're waiting, I would also remind everyone, including those of you watching on YouTube, that you can always report any concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. Ms. Minor, do we have anyone who has indicated that they would like to speak?
No, I see no hands.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Minor. We will now continue with the next agenda item, which is my remarks. Our meeting today includes updates on the WMSC's ongoing safety oversight activities, including the status of Metrorail's response to our order related to the 7000 series rail cars. The WMSC is continuing our active involvement in the National Transportation Safety Board's investigation into the October 12 derailment. The WMSC has also been consistently communicating with Metrorail regarding Metro's plans required under our order to safely return the 7000 series rail cars to revenue service. WMSC staff will provide further updates about the 7000 series cars later in this meeting. The WMSC has been continuing our other proactive work to identify and require Metrorail to address safety issues, including through our robust safety audit and corrective action plan oversight process. Later in this meeting, we will also consider several safety event investigations. That concludes my remarks. Dr. Meyer, do you have any opening remarks?
Thank you, Chair Hart. I do. We continue to work as part of the NTSB investigation into the October 12th derailment. Our teams are also frequently interacting with Metrorail in regard to our December 29th order, keeping the 7000 series rail cars out of service until Metrorail develops an acceptable return to service plan. It's up to Metrorail to determine the time needed to gather the information and tools it needs to develop and implement a safe return to service plan as required under our order. Our staff is communicating with Metrorail on an ongoing basis about the 7000 series rail cars and with all of the parties to the NTSB investigation. Metrorail has not provided a specific time frame for when it plans to submit its return to service plan, and our order does not contain any deadlines. Once again, I've asked other members of the WMSC team to provide a more detailed update for you on the 7000 series rail cars as part of the next agenda item. At the same time, our staff are continuing our oversight work in other areas, including safety audits, inspections, investigations, and safety certification oversight. For example, we verified last month that Metrorail has implemented worker protection features as part of the control board in the Alexandria Yard Tower. We had identified this missing protection feature during work on our rail operations audit in October. The draft of that report was transmitted to WMATA last month, but as noted in that draft report, we had communicated the safety concern in real time when we identified it. And we are pleased that it's now been corrected. We also issued a finding last August on Metrorail not following its safety certification process. Had Metrorail followed its process, it could have prevented this safety deficiency from occurring in the first place. Metrorail is moving forward with implementation of an approved corrective action plan to address the safety certification finding. Several key interim steps in this CAP are scheduled to be completed by this summer. Metrorail expects to complete implementation of all aspects of the safety certification CAP by summer 2023. Concerning our safety audits, since your last meeting, we issued our final report on Metrorail's emergency management and fire life safety programs. This audit identified some improvements since 2015, including markedly improved training and system familiarization for local first responders. The report also identified 14 findings, areas where Metrorail is not meeting its documented commitments as specified in its agency safety plan, its written procedures, and other requirements. These findings included that Metrorail does not consistently follow the incident command system, that Metro Transit Police Department personnel routinely enter the roadway despite not having RWP qualifications required by Metrorail rules, and that 911 calls are inconsistent, incomplete, and contribute to delayed or ineffective emergency response. In addition to the findings that Metrorail is required to address, our audit also includes 5 recommendations. For the rail operations audit, we are awaiting any technical corrections that Metrorail may identify. We carefully consider any of these items and incorporate any changes as appropriate before issuing a final report. Mr. Raddick will describe our current audit work in more detail later in the meeting. As you noted, Chair Hart, our audit activity is a critical part of our proactive work to identify safety issues before a safety event occurs. On another note, we have continued our positive interactions with the FTA regarding their audit of our program, and they have communicated their plans to close findings based on information we have already provided to them and based on information that we will be providing over the next 2 weeks. Our discussions have confirmed that our safety oversight program is strong and that addressing the issues that they did identify is straightforward through some adjustments to our program documents as part of our continuous improvement process. We expect some of these changes to include incorporating elements of some of our documented processes that are already in place into the annual program standard revision that will come before you for your consideration in the coming months. As a recap, I testified last month before the House Committee on Oversight and Reform's Subcommittee on Government Operations, before the Maryland General Assembly's House Appropriations Committee's Transportation and Environment Subcommittee, and before the DC Council's Committee of the Whole. I appreciate these opportunities to explain the effectiveness of our audit, inspection, investigation, and other work that is leading to the required safety improvements at Metrorail. Finally, I'd like to welcome a new staff member who's joined us since your last meeting. Ashley Rhodes is our new program coordination specialist focused on audits and corrective action plan work. Welcome, Ashley. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. I just think it might be useful for the benefit of those listening to give us a brief statement on what were the subjects testified in the 3 times that you gave testimony.
The major focus of all of these hearings, whether that was the announced focus or not, was on the safety of the 7000 series rail cars and on the orders that we issued both in October and December regarding the rail cars and plans for return to service of those rail cars, as well as the overall effectiveness of our safety oversight program. At least that was the focus of what I testified on. Obviously, other witnesses received other questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions from any of the other commissioners for Dr. Meyer? Okay, seeing none, before we move on, I would like to join Dr. Meyer in welcoming Ashley Rhodes to the staff. We look forward to the opportunity to work with her. Now we'll move on to a status update on orders related to the 7000 series rail cars. Ms. Samara Singha.
Thank you, Chair Hart. As required by the WMSC order, all 7000 series trains are being kept out of passenger service until Metrorail develops and implements a return to service plan as specified in our orders. As always, we continue our frequent interactions with Metrorail personnel at all levels of the organization to ensure that our oversight is as informed as possible. The National Transportation Safety Board is in charge of the accident investigation into the October 12th derailment, and we are continuing to work with them on the investigation as party to the investigation. The investigation has not yet determined the cause of the wheel movement on 7000 series axles. Work is continuing to gather and analyze additional information as part of the investigation. I provided specific details at your last meeting regarding the timeline from October 12th through late January. Since your last meeting, we have continued our active oversight work. This includes observations of measurement and inspection work in various facilities, data reviews, and frequent meetings. As an example, 2 weeks ago, we observed another demonstration of Metrorail's new digital dial gauge tool. We also observed Metrorail's initial site assessment work for automated wayside inspection systems it may also use in the future. We have frequent interactions with Metrorail and open lines of communication with Metrorail and the parties to the NTSB investigations for any questions or discussions. We continue our independent reviews of data and other documentation. The investigative work is active and ongoing, including the planning of various test activities. The continuing work on causal analysis and data reviews, including work with the NTSB as it relates directly to the derailment investigation, can help inform Metrorail's return to service plan development. The WMSC has not set a timeline for Metrorail to develop this plan because the WMSC's priority is a plan that provides for the safety of riders, workers, and others. When a future plan is in place, we will closely monitor implementation of this plan as we did for the prior plan. In addition to work related directly to the investigation, we continue our regular oversight work related to Metrorail's railcar programs. This includes shop inspections and observations and meetings, data reviews, and discussions related to Metrorail's use of 7000 series cars outside of passenger service as part of previously planned testing or train operator qualifications. Thank you, and that completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Samar Singh. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Samar Singh? Okay.
One question.
Yes, please, Commissioner Hall.
With regards to the observations of the new digital dial gauge tool, did it appear to have the potential for effectiveness?
That is correct, Commissioner Hall. We did have a chance to observe and raise questions regarding the plans ahead in terms of how quickly these will be available for use and application throughout the system. We also raised questions about training and making sure that the staff who would be required to utilize these digital dial gauges and whether or not that training is in place and what the plan is to get the forces trained for the use of this tool. So there was extensive discussion as well as an opportunity to observe several aspects of the digital dial gauge, including the calibration activities and calibration tools that would be required for Metro to maintain these in accurate working order.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Samar Singh. Do any other commissioners have any questions for Ms. Samar Singh? All right, hearing none, we will now move on to the next item on our agenda, which is audits, with an update from Audit and CAP Program Manager, Mr. Davis Raddick. Mr. Raddick?
Thank you, Chair Hart. On February 22nd, we issued our Emergency Preparedness and Fire Life Safety Audit Report. As with each of our audits, the work on this audit included extensive reviews of Metrorail documents, on-site work such as interviews with numerous people, and site visits to various parts of the Metrorail system. Our audits assess Metrorail against the relevant criteria, such as the requirements of Metrorail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, requirements specified in other Metrorail documents such as SOPs and orders, and regulatory requirements. The audit demonstrates that Metrorail has made some improvements since the 2015 smoke accident near L'Enfant Plaza Station, including markedly improved training and system familiarization for local first responders. However, the audit also demonstrates that there are many critical areas where safety improvements are required for Metrorail to meet its own written requirements, to provide adequate procedures or requirements, and to ensure adequate training, coordination, and supervision. The audit findings included safety deficiencies in incident command and interdepartmental coordination to ensure safety and in training and procedures. As always, the WMSC communicated safety concerns to WMATA as they were identified during this audit process so that Metrorail could begin interim steps to address these safety deficiencies. Metrorail has until later this month to provide the required corrective action plan proposals. Last month, we transmitted our draft rail operations audit report to Metrorail. This audit addressed the tasks carried out by and training for personnel such as train operators, interlocking operators, station managers, rail quality control officers, and rail supervisors. Metrorail has until next week to provide any technical corrections. As always, we will carefully consider technical corrections for Metrorail if there are any, before issuing a final report in coming weeks. Following the issuance of the final report, Metrorail will have 30 days to develop and submit corrective action plan proposals to address any findings. We are preparing to transmit a draft report of our station maintenance, elevator, and escalator audit to Metrorail for technical review soon. On-site work for our next audit begins this week. This audit will examine Metrorail's communication systems, programs related to voice or data transmissions, and related equipment, for example, radio and public address systems. This audit will conclude our first triennial audit cycle, which began a few months after the FTA certified our safety oversight program in March of 2019. We will then begin our second audit cycle. We provided the initial schedule for this next 3-year audit cycle to Metrorail on January 13th, and this schedule can be changed if needed. These audits cover all aspects of Metrorail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan and are designed to proactively identify safety issues. Because Metrorail did not yet have a PTASP at the start of this triennial cycle, this current cycle includes assessments related to the predecessor document, the System Safety Program Plan, for periods when the SSPP was in effect. Metrorail's first PTASP became effective on December 31st, 2020, following your approval in November 2020. Each finding in our audits identifies an area where Metrorail is not complying with its requirements or external requirements, lacks a necessary requirement or procedure, has requirements or procedures that are insufficient for safety, or where there is an unsafe condition. For each of our findings, Metrorail is required to develop and implement a corrective action plan. Our teams review Metrorail corrective action plan proposals and provide feedback if revisions are required. After a CAP is implemented, the WMSC monitors Metrorail as part of our regular inspections and oversight to ensure that the safety changes remain in place and are continually assessed for effectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raddick. Do any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Raddick?
One question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Hall, please.
Yes, with regards to the next audit cycle, and you indicated that we will be conveying our plans to Washington Metro with regards to our thoughts for the next cycle. Is there a requirement for us to also convey our plans for the next audit cycle to the FTA?
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. I'm not sure there is a requirement to provide to the FTA, although we do have requirements to submit to the FTA every year, which include audit reports that we've gone through. So they will be kept up to date as we issue those next cycle reports, and they will get a compilation of this past the triennial cycle that we're in now that will conclude this summer. They will get that entire compendium of all of those audits combined, but I'm not sure if any others know of a requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else on the staff know that with certainty?
Yes, we know that with certainty. Ms. Samara Singh?
I was just going to say that is exactly what we are required to do. We are required to publish a schedule and communicate that to the rail transit agency that we oversee as expeditiously as possible, leaving room for any adjustments if needs arise. But throughout the 3-year cycle, we are required also to report to FDA on an annual basis through what they refer to as the State Safety Oversight Reporting Tool, to ensure that they know the progression and the completion of the work associated with triennial audits throughout the 3-year cycle. As you all know, we conduct our triennial audits on an ongoing basis. So every year on the 15th of March, when this State Safety Oversight Report is due to FDA, we are required as part of the components that we report to FDA, the completion of the planned audits for the previous year. So in this year, we would be reporting back to FDA on the work we have done in 2021 calendar year on triennial audits. But that is the extent of the requirement.
Thank you, Ms. Marsing.
Chair Hart, I have a question.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
Do we have the ability to change the schedule, or, for example, if a compelling issue comes up and we want to do a special audit or something, can we go ahead and do that? Or do we have to schedule it in advance and have approval of?
We don't need anyone's approval to conduct
Washington
an
Metro.
audit. We made many changes to our schedule during the first few years when we saw compelling safety issues. For example, we advanced the audit on that we conducted at the Rock because we were concerned about some of the safety issues that we were seeing there, and we made other adjustments during the triennial period. So we certainly will not hesitate to make adjustments if necessary in the second triennial cycle.
So for example, the audit of the Rock, was that on the agenda? Was that on the schedule?
Yes and no. There was an audit of rail operations that was a project that was on the schedule for later in our first triennial cycle. We advanced that to earlier in the cycle, and we focused it on issues in the Rock, picking up the remaining rail operations issues in a recent audit that we recently published.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Lobby. Any commissioners have any other questions for Mr. Raddick? Okay, seeing none, we will now take up the next agenda item, which is corrective action plan. So back to you, Mr. Raddick.
Thank you, Chair Hart. When Metrorail develops corrective action plans to address the safety deficiencies identified by WMSC findings, Metrorail submits these plans to the WMSC for review and approval. Following revisions and feedback, we have approved for implementation the remaining CAP proposals to address findings and recommendations in the fitness for duty, traction power, and rail car audits that we issued last year. Metrorail is responsible for implementing its corrective action plans on the schedule documented in the CAP. Corrective action plans that the WMSC recently closed based on documentation. I apologize for that. Documentation that Metrorail has implemented the CAP included those related to Metrorail's implementation of a hearing conservation program, improvements to ensure that track defects identified by the track geometry vehicle are addressed, and significant initial training improvements for new rail controllers. Other recent CAP closures include improved interdepartmental communication of track and structures issues, and documentation of engineering inspections of Metrorail structures. We monitor the work that is progressing on each CAP as WMATA implements the corrections to close the safety gaps that we identified. Following implementation and closure, the WMSC monitors Metrorail's actions to continue these safety improvements through our audit and other oversight activities. As was highlighted at your last meeting, the WMSC also monitors other corrective actions, including recommended corrective actions that Metrorail commits to as a result of its safety investigations. For example, the WMSC's oversight identified in January that Metrorail was past due on a critical safety protection to remove internet video streaming access from terminal supervisors' computers. Terminal supervisors perform duties similar to a rail traffic controller for the area near an end-of-line station. WMSC investigations and oversight had identified examples of distraction. Our follow-up on this issue led to Metrorail furthering work to remove this internet access and improve safety. This has included deployment of these restrictions on the first test machines to check for any unintended impacts. We continue our close oversight of this work to ensure that Metrorail departments are openly cooperating to achieve safety improvements. These safety improvements are also to be completed in yard towers where interlocking operators control yard operations. Separate investigations and oversight have identified distractions in these locations as well. Metrorail is also working on installation of other related safety improvements in these areas. This includes phone call and video recording that will allow for Metrorail to more effectively carry out its responsibility to conduct supervisory oversight. We expect to also use these tools to carry out our own oversight responsibilities and to continually improve our investigative work and the corrective actions that are associated with investigations. Related to roadway worker protection, Metrorail is progressing its work on the short-term actions it committed to, including new foul time and exclusive track occupancy procedures. Metrorail is also taking steps toward improvements to their RWP training program with a focus initially on gathering information about available training delivery options. Metrorail has begun work on actions that will take a bit longer, including an overall assessment of its RWP program and track access guide. Metrorail's work includes comparisons of their current program to both FRA regulations and practices at other transit agencies. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Raddick. Do any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Raddick?
I have a question for Mr. Raddick.
Yes, please,
Sure.
Commissioner Lobby.
I'm very interested to hear about, how we follow up on the caps. Before we close the cap, I assume that Washington Metro comes to us, provides evidence that they're doing something that satisfies the cap. Do we immediately go and check to make sure those programs are in place, or does it have to wait for an audit cycle to come around before we can confirm it? Or does it depend on the situation?
Commissioner Lobby, I can take that. So as each cap has several deliverables, it could range from 2 to as many as 18. And so those are submitted at the cadence specified in that approved corrective action plan. And as those things come up and are submitted and they become due, our SMEs review those deliverables, what's submitted by WMATA, and in some cases that may require verifying via site visits or other means other than what's just stated on what's submitted and deliverable. And so we independently will check to make sure that those things say what they say they say.
So you do independently, review each element and report back that it's actually been completed and in place.
Yes.
And we're not actually the only ones. Metro, as of a few years ago, strengthened and split out from its safety department an internal compliance department known as QUICO that is a very strong now and very fully functioning audit and internal corporate compliance department for Metro, and many caps include a requirement for a sometimes protracted period of assessment conducted by QUICO and audit reports that are created to ensure that the not only has the change been made, but that it's been successfully implemented for a period of time and is having the desired effect.
Well, I think the desired effect is really important. I was interested in some of the things that Mr. Ratchett mentioned. They talked about Metrorail working on safety improvements, including phone call and video recordings that will allow Metrorail to more effectively carry out its responsibility to conduct supervisory oversight. Do we know that as they apply these systems, as they if they're recording phone calls or recording video, do they actually periodically review it as part of their oversight to make sure that everything is up and up, or does it take an event before they go and download it and say, somebody violated a rule or did something inappropriate. Do we know that they have a process in place so that they actually use this data that they collect and actually draw conclusions from it and use it for oversight of the work that's conducted there?
I know that we use the data for that purpose and that we do proactive and prospective inspection work using that data. But I'd have to defer to another member of the staff to speak about any any use that Metro makes of that recording capability.
Commissioner Lobby, I'll answer that. So there are several avenues that we have spoken with Metro in order for them to do exactly what you're talking about, which is supervisory oversight and essentially performance testing on what is established as a correction to the issue that we discovered. So as part of the events that led to us understanding the lack of these features at these terminal supervisors blockhouses, that led to a focus on getting these electronic features added and installed. And in addition to that, Metrorail has its performance monitoring team within the safety department, which also has taken on the role of conducting performance assessments in these areas to evaluate whether these features are working, whether they are disabled, and whether or not the individuals there are conducting their work as required. Now, in addition to that, we also recognize that the supervisory staff, the supervisory individuals who have responsibilities for overseeing the terminal supervisors are needed to be conducting various kinds of performance assessments. And this is exactly what we are capturing in the rail operations audit that we have conveyed in draft to Metro for their technical review as well, where we recognize that there needs to be a much more holistic approach in conducting operational testing as well as supervisory oversight on all these aspects of the frontline employees and the subordinates who are overseen by supervisors. So there is a holistic approach that we are working on conveying through findings on the rail operations audit as well.
Well, that's good to hear. I see in the accidents that we're going to talk about today, supervisory oversight is one of the corrective actions in just about every one of them. And it's important that Washington Metro has the tools to do the supervisory oversight, but they obviously have to have the program to make sure that they use those tools consistently to basically get a picture of their own operation. So I'm glad to hear they're moving in that direction, and certainly we can use those tools also to provide oversight, but it's got to be Washington Metro's primary responsibility to use those tools to make sure they have a safe operation. Thank you.
If I may add, it is exactly the discussions of this nature that you and the other commissioners have conducted over the last 18 months on this topic especially, that has led to Washington Metro recognizing the need to have a sophisticated, sustained effort on performance monitoring, including—
Well, I'm very happy we've got their attention on this, and hopefully we can push it through to completion to make sure that they do provide this critical oversight of their operations, which has been lacking in the past.
Okay, well, thank you, Commissioner Lobby, for the question, and thank you, Mr. Raddick, Dr. Meyer, and Ms. Marsinga for that very helpful and useful information. Any further questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Raddick? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we will now move on to the next agenda item, which is our regular status report on our oversight of the Silver Line Phase 2 safety certification process. Mr. Sahu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Metrorail and MWA are progressing toward Metrorail declaring an operational readiness state. Metrorail will then take provisional care, custody, and control of the line. Metrorail has not set a specific timeline for that at this point. Currently, we're tracking approximately 16 open items at this point in our pre-revenue service review part 1, out of more than 100 items that we have tracked over the course of this process. All of the items have agreed upon paths forward to be completed. Part 2 of our pre-revenue service review, or PRSR, will cover Metrorail's testing and preparedness to operate and maintain the line. This includes ensuring that Metrorail has met its staffing, training, and testing requirements to safely operate the extension, and that Metrorail has taken the other steps required by its safety certification program plan and the cooperative agreement between MWA and WMATA. We'll formally initiate part 2 of the PRSR soon. We're finalizing specific assignments for our subject matter experts as part of our on-site work and our additional records reviews over the next few months. Metrorail will prepare a safety and security certification verification report. The Safety and Security Certification Verification Report is Metrorail's documentation that it has identified and appropriately mitigated known hazards, and that the project has followed other aspects of the design, construction, and implementation process. The WMSC and Metrorail expect to share draft documents related to the pre-revenue service review and SSCVR on an ongoing basis as part of our already ongoing open communication regarding any identified issues. Our concurrence is required before the line may open for passenger service. This concurrence will be transmitted in writing when Metrorail has shown that it has properly conducted its safety certification process, including any necessary safety mitigations or corrective actions. These requirements are based on Metrorail's own safety certification requirements, agreements, and policies. The timing of our work is entirely dependent on the progress that the Airports Authority and Metrorail make on their work to demonstrate that each required step has been completed. This includes the closure and mitigation of items that the WMSC has identified and communicated through our independent safety reviews of the project. In accordance with our program standard and FTA guidance, we also work in concert with the separate FTA project management oversight on this project to ensure that our work is complete while avoiding duplication of effort. We continue to closely monitor the Airports Authority and Metrorail's progress. Thank you. That completes this presentation, Chair Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Sahu. I just have one question about the reference to the Safety and Security Certification Verification Report. Since security is not really in our bailiwick, how is that part of it handled? Do you know?
Right, so it's just, it's old verbiage that nobody has changed. So the security aspect is not our duty. It is the TSA's duty. So it's just the verbiage everybody uses, but for our respect, so it's just safety.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Sahu? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the safety event investigation reports that we will have for today's presentation. We will hear presentations on all of the reports, and then, unless the commissioners decide to do it otherwise, then we will consider a single motion on all of the reports that we are prepared to adopt. Investigation Program Manager Natalie Kiro will present the first report. Ms. Kiro.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0146 relates to a train operating past workers on the red line at excessive speed, forcing the workers to jump out of the way. As noted in the meeting last month, this is one of several events that have led to corrective actions related to Metrorail's Roadway Worker Protection, or RWP program. Metrorail has committed to the implementation of broad revisions to the program over the next 2 years. In addition, these investigations have led to interim steps to address safety until that time. This event also led the WMSC to direct Metrorail to classify the area where this occurred as a hotspot requiring foul time protection until Metrorail completed a reassessment of the long-term safety requirements. That assessment confirmed the need for this area to be designated as a hotspot for the safety of Metrorail personnel. As part of the RWP improvements I described, Metrorail is reassessing hotspots and plans to establish a process to do this on a regular basis going forward. In addition to the RWP program, this event identified a rail supervisor in the operating cab of the train who likely distracted the train operator. This event occurred on the red line between Fort Totten and Tacoma stations on November 17, 2021. The train operator with the rail supervisor in the operating cab operated at full speed up to 59 miles per hour, despite being informed face-to-face by an advanced mobile flagger before departing the station that there were workers on the roadway ahead. That instruction included reiterating that the maximum allowed speed was half the regulated speed until seeing the work crew, then 15 miles per hour when passing the work crew. The train operator with the rail supervisor in the operating cab activated emergency braking while traveling 59 miles per hour. The track inspectors jumped out of the way just before the train reached their location. The train stopped entirely beyond the two track inspectors. The train operator and rail supervisor continued on to the next station without reporting this near miss that could have resulted in death of the roadway workers. The track inspectors reported the event. In interviews conducted for the investigation, the rail supervisor and train operator denied that the rail supervisor was in the operating cab during the event. However, CCTV video at the preceding and following stations showed the supervisor in the cab, and both track inspectors reported that there were two people in the cab at the time of this event. The supervisor had not received permission from the ROCC as required by Metrorail rules to be in the operating cab. The investigation determined rail supervisors regularly enter operating cabs without contacting ROCC as required. Supervisors are assigned tasks that may include entering the cab with permission to verify operator compliance with specific rules. In addition to the actions of the train operator and rail supervisor, the track inspection crew was not following Metrorail's roadway worker protection rules related to watchman lookouts. Each prior segment of the day's inspection had been with a team of 3 inspectors. However, this segment was conducted with only 2 inspectors due to the 3rd inspector needing a prolonged break at the prior station. The 2 inspectors on this segment of the inspection included one more experienced and one less experienced inspector. The more experienced inspector, acting as the roadway worker in charge, had designated themselves as the watchman lookout. However, they were positioned very close to the other inspector, apparently to help answer questions about what defects needed to be documented and reported. Metrorail rules require the watchman lookout to be focused solely on that responsibility and to be at least 50 feet ahead of the rest of the crew. This is required to provide ample time for workers to clear the tracks when a train is approaching. The RIC identified the train coming, and the track inspector described the 2 of them quickly jumped off the tracks. The train operator also described the inspectors as being startled and having to jump out of the way. The inspector stated that if the crew had been just 1 second slower, they would have been hit. Because this train does not have a forward-facing camera, the investigation could not determine precisely how close the train was when the inspectors finished clearing. Even then, due to the high speed of the train, the inspector stated they have to hold on tightly to the fence, marking the edge of the roadway to avoid being swept up in the force of the wind and into the train. As I noted earlier, based on the initial information gathered in the investigation, the WMSC directed Metrorail to require foul time in this area and to conduct an assessment of the proper long-term designation. Metrorail's evaluation determined that foul time will always be required in this area due to limited line of sight for a watchman lookout around the curve. Metrorail issued a permanent order codifying this change. Metrorail is also revising its advanced mobile flagger script to require train operators to repeat back the instructions. Metrorail distributed revised guidance to rail supervisors on train operator checks, and the track instructors department held safety briefings on the watchman lookout rules. In relation to this and other events, Metrorail has increased RWP compliance checks and reporting. The WMSC has transmitted a draft rail operations audit to Metrorail for technical review. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Kiro. Do any commissioners have any questions for Ms. Kiro?
I have some questions, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lobby, please.
This is a extremely serious incident. Very scary. I think we were very lucky that we didn't have individuals killed in this particular incident. But when in reading the report, I found a lot of discrepancies. The operator and the supervisor. The supervisor says he wasn't in the cab, and yet the evidence shows that he was in the cab, and even the roadway workers, said there were 2 people in the cab. the supervisor and the operator says that they were confused because there were other people in the tunnel, and there were no other people in the tunnel other than the work crew. In one part, the supervisor says that there were 4 people on one side of the train that out on the track, and the operator said there were additional people on the other side, which was also not true, because there were only 2 people in the work crew that they encountered. And you know, it goes on and on and on, but I'm really baffled at the confusing testimony of these 2 individuals in the cab. What's the result? Are they still working as supervisors and operators, or what?
No, they were both disqualified from their positions. That was definitely our response as well, was very serious. It was really super close call. So yeah, they are no longer in those positions.
Commissioner Lobby, you're muted.
The operator's no longer operating trains, and the supervisor is not a supervisor anymore. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the supervisor can, for the duration of the time that they're with WMATA, can never apply for a management position ever.
Okay, well, that certainly takes care of some of the issues. The train continued after the emergency stop also, without checking on the condition of the people that were working in the tunnel. I thought that was also pretty serious. And I see that Washington Metro has now designated this as a hot zone. Is that correct? Is there any explanation on why Metro didn't designate this as a hot zone before? I think the operator or someone that testified indicated that there had been close calls in this area before. Do we know anything about that?
Yes, so there was no regular schedule to reassess these hotspots on the roadway prior to this event. And now it is required. They're coming up with a plan to kind of go out there and reassess these on a regular basis. There was one of the track inspectors reported having some experience in that area before, but it was never fully reported or officially reported to anyone, and we could not confirm when this incident occurred. So, but immediately following the incident, it was treated as a foul time hotspot, and then when they went out there and actually evaluated the area, they confirmed that it will be permanently a hotspot.
Okay, and I also note that the supervisor was not drug and alcohol tested. That's a theme that we've hit over and over after these incidents. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Any explanation of why this happened once more?
In this case, probably because the supervisor stated they were not in the cab and they didn't have anything to do with the incident. But it's something that we have communicated with Metrorail about adjusting their adhering to their drug and alcohol testing.
Now, let me ask another question about the supervisor's role. When a supervisor is in the cab of operating Metro train, is he not just as responsible as the operator for the way that train's operated?
Yes, and they have since sent out information to the supervisors to let them know. They revised their policy a little bit, where the supervisor cannot, they could never interfere with the safe operation of the train, but they kind of spelled it out a little bit more, where the supervisor cannot give them any safety related discussions. Like if they see a minor thing that that like if they're checking their uniform, for example, and they see something minor, that could not be discussed while the train is being operated. It can only be discussed when the train is at a stop. Their supervisors are supposed to take over operations of the train if they feel necessary. If a rule is being broken, it's supposed to be reported immediately. So all of those, some of the things were already in there, and they were reiterated to the entire supervisor staff, and some of the things were added.
Well, according to the report, the operator received the information that there were people in the tunnel doing inspections from the advanced flagman. And according to the testimony, the supervisor was also there in the flag. And I would think between the two that they would understand that that meant that there had to be a speed restriction moving forward. But with all the different versions of the stories of what happened, you know, I'm not sure if you can make heads or tails out of some of the things that the operator and the supervisor said. But one concern I have with this particular report is that the actions that Washington Metro has taken in response to it, designating this area as a hotspot, you know, reminding the supervisors of their requirements and reminding the roadway workers that the watchman is supposed to be a watchman and not a track inspector. Does staff feel that this is an adequate response to the multiple issues that we've seen in this particular accident?
I think it's fair to say that this represents a very good first or maybe next set of steps with regard to this specific incident. But we have seen since the time that we conducted our RWP audit, through our rail operations audit, as well as through a variety of safety event investigation reports, that Metro's roadway worker protection program is in significant need of being strengthened, and that work is underway as we've discussed in prior meetings. So in no way is the work completed to get us where we need to be with regard to RWP at Metro.
Well, this was an RWP type of incident, but it goes well beyond it. It goes into operations and everything else. It's not just about
absolutely.
You know, making sure that they had the right protection and the watchman was doing what he should have been doing. It's got a lot to do with oversight of the entire operation. So, you know, my feeling, and I'll be guided by what the commissioners want to do here, but my feeling is that the response that Washington Metro has identified to this accident probably isn't enough in this case, that there's many questions that have been left open and not really addressed by the corrective actions that Washington Metro is taking. So I know they have a rail operations audit report now that's coming out that hopefully will address some of these, but I think at least from Washington Metro, I would have expected at least some acknowledgement that there are multiple issues here that needed to be addressed. And I think they hit on a couple of them, but I think they left a lot of them out. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Labia. I'm certainly encouraged to see how strictly they responded to not telling the truth, because to me, that's the most, any intentional wrongdoing troubles me greatly, and that certainly is one. Not telling the truth certainly is one intentional wrongdoing that troubles me greatly, and I'm glad to see they had such a strong response on that. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Kiro on this one? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Labia, again for raising those points, and it really indicates why we're here and why we have a job to do. Ms. Kiro, the next report I believe is yours, so the floor is yours once again.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0147 examined an electrical arcing and smoke event on a train between Mount Vernon Square and Gallery Place stations on Friday, October 22nd, 2021. During the response to this event, riders self-evacuated from the train and walked to Gallery Place station platform. Approximately 100 other riders were then led to the station in a controlled evacuation. Initially, the train operator reported a brake problem when emergency braking applied unexpectedly. When the train operator, at the direction of the Rail Operations Control Center controller, went to investigate, the train operator identified and reported smoke coming from the train. Riders were moving from one car to another to avoid the smoke. The train operator returned to the lead car to shut off the HVAC system. A rider on the train also used their cell phone to report smoke to ROCC and to Metro Transit Police. A car maintenance road mechanic and rail supervisor attempted troubleshooting for approximately 10 minutes. A ROCC assistant superintendent called for a DC fire and EMS response. Approximately 23 minutes after the train stopped in the tunnel, some riders began self-evacuating from the train. ROCC controllers quickly de-energized their rail power on that track. However, Metrorail personnel did not have hot sticks to verify that their rail power was de-energized as required by Metrorail policy. DC Fire and EMS did have a hot stick, and they verified a few minutes later that power was de-energized. The other riders on the train were then led to the Gallery Place station platform by the personnel on scene in a controlled evacuation. Metrorail initially attempted to move the train to a rail yard on its own after the evacuation, but that led to a solid motor overload on 4 cars. The incident train was later coupled to another train to be moved to a rail yard. This did not include use of the reverse stretch procedure Metrorail implemented last year to reduce the risk of runaway trains. Regarding the initial event, the investigation determined the train was moving approximately 35 miles per hour when emergency braking activated on the middle 2 cars of the 6-car train. The battery circuit breaker also tripped in an adjacent car. Post-event inspection of the car showed evidence of electrical arcing and flashing in several parts of car 3282 and melted sockets and connectors between the cars, a damaged cover plate, and other damage on car 3283. These failures suggest that Metrorail did not properly maintain the wiring and associated insulation and connectors in these parts of these rail cars. Metrorail is revising inspections to include inspections of additional cables and checks of cable terminal lugs to car body ground continuity. Metrorail reiterated the importance of carrying hot sticks and electrical safety gloves to rail supervisors and provided the safety equipment to supervisors who did not have them. Transit police personnel reported that radio transmissions were difficult to hear during the event. The WMSC is conducting a communications audit that includes a focus on radio systems. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Kiro. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Kiro?
Chair Hart, I have a couple of questions.
Yes, please, Commissioner Loudon.
There was a self-evacuation that took place on this train, and in looking at the accident report, it says that the folks that self-evacuated through the operator's window. Can you tell me anything more about that?
So the train operator did state that they secured the cab, and then the cab was locked when they went back to investigate. However, MTPD reported seeing some customers exit through the cab window. We do also know that emergency door handles were pulled, so it is likely that they exited through the emergency doors.
Okay, so we don't think that they actually went out the windows. Is that correct? The cab window? I don't
think so.
You don't think so? Okay. I wanted to ask a question about these hot sticks. It says rail supervisors are required now to carry hot sticks and gloves. Apparently, this was a requirement that had been in place. But in looking at the bulletin, there was a bulletin as part of the accident documentation to remind rail supervisors to carry hot sticks and gloves. Apparently, you need the insulated gloves in order to use a hot stick. And it said the station emergency cabinets were removed from stations due to the underutilization and unsustainability of the equipment. Do we know anything about that? Apparently the hot sticks used to be in a cabinet that was in the stations and has subsequently been removed. Do we know why they did that, or do we agree with that move?
I don't know if Mr. Bruce Walker had more information. I do know they used to be in the kiosk, but he can add.
Thank you, Ms. Kuros. So yes, as Natalie was saying, they used to have them placed in the station so that the supervisors could, or whoever needed the equipment could go to the cabinet and retrieve it when needed. That has changed. Supervisors are now required to carry the safety equipment with them, so they have it at all times, as well as the insulated safety gloves. And in our operations audit, we noted that the supervisor, some of the equipment was not in compliance. So that is something that was picked up in the operations audit that's let's just share with Metro.
So since some of the equipment wasn't in compliance, they eliminated the cabinet completely. Is that what they did?
Metrorail made a decision to remove the equipment from the stations and assign it to the supervisors and the personnel directly.
Does that make sense to you logically to not have it there in the kiosk? I would think in a perfect world you'd have it in both places. You know, what do you think?
I understand and agree with what you're saying. The track personnel that respond to incidents are required to bring it with them. The supervisors are also required to carry it as well. So that would be a possible redundant protection, but at this point, Metrorail has decided not to keep it in each station.
Well, just as a reminder, there's in the last 2 meetings, we've covered a number of incidents that had to do with the need to hot stick the third rail where the equipment wasn't available. So to me, it would seem that it would make sense to keep this type of critical equipment, you know, at least in the stations and in a box or something where it is readily accessible to the folks that need it, because you know, we've run into this particular issue a couple of times now. Thank you. That's all the questions I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Any other questions for Ms. Kuros on this report? Okay, hearing none. WMSC track and structures expert Jermaine Walker will present the next 2 reports. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Chair Hart. The next 2 investigations relate to improper use of the trip machine, a tire remover and inserter. This is a large, complex roadway maintenance machine used to remove and replace rail ties during track renewal work. The first investigation, Whiskey 0148, relates to the derailment of one of these work vehicles near Deanwood Station on November 15th, 2021. This is similar to an investigation into an April 2021 derailment you adopted in September of last year. The WMSC is requiring Metrorail to address many of these issues through corrective action plans required due to our roadway maintenance machine audit issue last year. In this event, trip machine TR-05 derailed while traveling inbound in a 2-unit convoy. The derailment was not immediately reported to the ROC. The investigation demonstrates the vehicle was being operated faster than allowed, approximately 20 miles per hour, rather than the maximum allowed speed of 15 miles per hour. The investigation also suggests that the equipment operator was operating a vehicle in work mode rather than travel mode, which increased the risk of a derailment. The equipment operator did not immediately report the derailment. A ROC controller contacted the TR-05 equipment operator via radio to ask if the unit was still moving. The equipment operator said they would call on the phone to respond and reported the derailment in that phone call. Third rail power was de-energized and the TR-05 equipment operator requested foul time to check the extent of any damage and confirm derailment. The controller denied the request because the equipment operator did not have the required hot stick to confirm third rail power was de-energized. The roadway worker in charge assigned to the work location, the roadway worker in charge assigned to the work location the unit had been en route to was dispatched to the derailment location, the hot stick, and confirmed that power was down. During an interview, the equipment operator stated there were 2 flashing red lights and a fault on the unit's dashboard during the pre-trip inspection. A mechanic cleared the indications and told the equipment operator that the unit was safe for use. The equipment operator said the flashing red lights and fault reappeared as the vehicle entered Deanwood Station. The operator continued on. As the vehicle exited the station, the front end derailed. Post-derailment inspections and analysis performed by engineers and maintenance personnel determined the unit had multiple deficiencies, including an inoperative camera system monitor and headlights, as well as a missing right front gripper pin. The pin is used to hold the gripper arm in place during vehicle movement. Metrorail's Office of Maintenance Away Engineering determined that if the vehicle was in work mode while negotiating a curve at this location, this would likely have caused the unit's wheel to lift off the rail and result in a derailment. The curve was not within Metrorail track specifications. The cross level did not comply with Metrorail's requirements. Still, if the unit had been in travel mode, specifications suggest it could have safely navigated the track, even if out of tolerance. Metrorail is exploring installing overspeed alarms on roadway maintenance machines, Class 2 or Class 2 vehicles. Metrorail is also beginning the work necessary to install forward-facing, rear-facing, and cab video recorders and data recorders on self-propelled roadway maintenance machines in coming years. The second investigation related to the trip machine, Whiskey 0149, involved a collision of a different trip machine of the same design with a signal at Shady Grove Rail Yard on November 15th, 2021. In this case, the operator did not verify that the right arm was properly secured and unintentionally moved both arms. This led to the right arm striking and damaging a signal, knocking a signal to the ground. The rock was not notified until 40 minutes after the collision occurred. A rail controller documented the information provided, including that ATC was on the scene, but made no notifications regarding the event. This event was not reported to the WMSC as required until the following day, November 16th, 2021, well outside of the required 2-hour notification window. During an interview, the equipment operator reported concerns with the training they received on 4 of the most complex pieces of equipment they are expected to operate, including the trip machine. The equipment operator did not feel that the training had enough detail or enough seat time to become efficient. The equipment operator stated they had little experience operating a trip machine. The WMSC audit issued last year of roadway maintenance machine inspection, maintenance, and training found that equipment operators are not fully trained on each type of vehicle they may be directed to operate, and at least some of the training has not included sufficient hands-on experience. Metrorail is in the process of implementing a corrective action plan to address this safety deficiency. Metrorail is scheduled to complete implementation of this CAP this fall. Metrorail also redistributed a safety bulletin related to safety event reporting requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I'm just curious, what's the difference, if you know, between the travel mode and the work mode to change the likelihood of derailment? Do you understand what physically changes that causes the differential in the likelihood of derailment?
When the vehicle is in travel mode, the hydraulics is pretty much locked out, to put it simply. And travel mode is pretty much putting it in a mode where you're just taking it from one location to the other. Once you go to work mode means you're pretty much getting ready to insert or remove ties or do some work at a work location, which now your hydraulics are activated, and any touch to, like, say something like the arms, which pulls or insert the ties, with any touch will now be activated, and it moves a little bit more when it's in work mode. It's a little bit more jumpier in work mode because it's just ready. It's kind of ready to go. It's like say like you give like a little kid like a energy drink. They're going to be jumping all over the place. That's pretty much how the machine responds once it's in work mode, in a way.
Okay, thank you. And this may not have been within the purview of your investigation, but did you get a sense that this lack of training was kind of limited to these 2 people involved, or was it more generic than that? Did you have any sense of that?
When we conducted the audit for RMMs, that was a huge focus, because we knew for specialized equipment such as the trip, which can do a lot of damage, things like the big tampers and big equipment like that can really that could really tear up the railroad. We wanted to focus on the training because a lot of what we were seeing was that operators may have had the training, might have went to a nice class for a couple of weeks or so and have been told about the equipment, but that equipment requires a lot of in the seat time, a lot of touch and feel on a railroad of what to do and what not to do, and to really get the understanding of how this equipment moves on Metrorail property. And so we had a concern that there was not a lot of seat time being given to these operators. A lot of these operators that are taught this equipment will go out there and they know enough as what we call just to be dangerous. And so we really wanted to focus on that, go through the records and find out and look at areas where they can improve on their training. And I will say that they are working on that, but they still have some improvements and a good ways to go to really I think put a dent in this. And even after interviews, after some of these incidents, we were told that the training is just not sufficient, or where a lot of these operators don't feel comfortable being in these pieces of equipment, even though they have been taught and given the old cross to say, hey, go out here and you're good to go.
Again, this may not have been part of the purview of your investigation, but did you get the sense that once they're trained on the equipment, they use it frequently so they won't just forget just by dint of time all of the finer points that they need to know? Or is it something that they do a lot or not a lot? Do you have any sense of that?
Absolutely. And that's a good point, because the answer to that is no. A lot of the operators felt like once they got trained, they didn't go right into the equipment right away. So where does that training go? It kind of goes right out the window, where you need to refamiliarize yourself with the equipment and be with the equipment on a regular basis to really get that familiarization. And that was also a part of the audit, that you would train these individuals and then just send them out, but they're not going to operate that equipment that you trained them on. And one of the points that we were making during the audit was that you're training them on the equipment because, in my eyes, you have an open spot for them to actually work on where they can put that training to use. And unfortunately, a lot of times they'll sit for a while unless there's a big capital project going on, and they can easily hop in the equipment and be a part of the work.
Okay, thank you. Do any other commissioners have any questions for Mr. Walker? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Walker, will you please present the next report?
Chair Hart, it's going to be the other Mr. Walker presenting the next report.
I'm sorry, okay.
So, investigation Whiskey 0150 looked into a collision and a later evacuation for life safety reasons on the track shared with the Blue, Orange, and Silver Line on November 14th, 2021. At approximately 12:33 a.m., a Blue Line train struck a piece of sheet metal on the roadway between Federal Triangle and Smithsonian stations. The train was moving 27 miles per hour. Vehicle data shows that power to the train decreased for approximately 19 seconds. This collision went unnoticed, and the train continued to Smithsonian Station. Approximately 416 feet after departing the station, the lead car of the train lost third rail power when the train was moving 31 miles per hour. The HVAC system was disabled. The investigation determined this is likely when the rail car collector shoe fuses failed, preventing the collector shoes from drawing power into the train from the third rail. The train continued in service, and an automatic power-saving feature known as load shedding applied when the train was approaching LaFont Plaza Station on at least the lead cars of the train. This turned off all regular interior lights in those passenger cars approximately 620 feet from the station platform. The train was moving 40 miles per hour. While the train was stopped at the station, the train operator reported this to the ROCC that only emergency lights were on. The ROCC and train operators had some difficulties with radio transmissions, and the ROCC controller stated that the train operator should contact ROCC again from the platform at the next station, which will be Federal Center Southwest. As the train entered that station, the train operator heard a loud noise and saw electrical arcing and smoke coming from the train. The Rail Operations Control Center instructed the operator to turn off the HVAC system and evacuate riders from that train. The ROCC de-energized third rail power approximately 3 minutes after the train entered Federal Center Southwest Station. The investigation could not determine the source of the sheet metal on the roadway that was struck by the train and later caused the electrical arcing event. Track inspection after the event identified broken wires and PVC pipes that were likely damaged due to the train striking and dragging the metal object. These appear to be part of the train to wayside communication or the TWC coil. So, thank you. That completes this report.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Was there, as part of your investigation, did you determine what that was that they ran into?
It was some sort of a metal object that wedged itself between the collector chute and the third rail. That's as much as I know. I don't know what the exact object was.
My goodness. Okay. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Walker?
Was this in a tunneled environment?
Yes. Federal Center Southwest is underground.
So, you know, and the reason I'm asking that is that therefore it couldn't have been, you know, something from some other party. Obviously, it had to have been left from some contractor or work crew.
I'm not sure. Ms. Kuros, do you know from what that piece of metal was? Do you recall?
Metrorail did not identify.
That's what I thought. So we don't know what that piece of metal is or was.
So I guess where I'm going with this is that with not really knowing where it could have come from, but it had to come from some party out there, either being Metrorail maintenance or contractor with Metrorail maintenance, whether there was an alert put out to the maintenance crews to ensure that materials that they're carrying are secured, something to that effect.
So track inspections were done and no one could identify it after being kind of twisted up and making contact with the third rail. So they don't know exactly what
Okay.
it was.
Okay.
Did the train drag the piece for a while, or did it just hit it and it stayed pretty much where it was?
From the way it was described, it made contact with it, which caused the train to lose current, causing the lights to go off, and then it drug it up until its final resting point.
This is a pretty amazing situation. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Walker? Okay, thank you. The next report will be Ms. Quiroz. Ms. Quiroz, the floor is yours.
And if you don't mind me mentioning, Chair Hart, just for the purpose of the minutes, that Commissioner Bob has joined the meeting.
Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0151 looked into a red signal overrun and improper train movement in the Alexandria Rail Yard on October 19th, 2021. A train operator who had been directed to move a train on the car wash track to the west instead moved the train to the east. Moving east is a more common movement for operators from this location than moving west. During this improper movement, the train operator briefly stopped at a red signal, then continued past the red signal without authorization. The train operator had incorrectly repeated back movement instructions provided over the radio by the interlocking operator. The interlocking operator did not identify this improper repeat back, and the train operator did not identify that the two signals the train operator repeated back were in opposite directions from each other. Reaching the signal, the train operator stated was not possible from that location as it's on an adjacent track. After moving the train past a red signal that was in the opposite direction the train operator was supposed to have moved in, the train operator stops at the next red signal in that improper direction and reported to the interlocking operator that the train was stopped at that signal. The interlocking operator then identified that the train operator had moved in the opposite direction that they were supposed to. The interlocking operator also saw the visual indications on the yard control board that the train had passed a red signal and trailed a switch. The Wmsc has transmitted a draft rail operations audit to Metrorail for technical review. The audit assessed issues related to this event, such as territory familiarization and personnel training. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Key Rose. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Key Rose? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Key Rose, will you please present the next reports?
Thank you, Chair Hart. The next two reports relate to other improper movements of trains. The first, Whiskey 0152, involves a collision with a bump post in the Greenbelt Rail Yard just after 1 a.m. on November 16th, 2021. A train operator bringing a train back into the yard at the end of their shift did not stop the train. The train collided with the bump post, causing substantial damage. Bump posts are the devices at the end of a track designed to absorb the shock of a low-speed collision. Metrorail rules require 4 safety stops approaching a bump post. Vehicle data shows the train operator only stopped twice. The train operator stopped once, 232 feet away, and again 155 feet away from the post, activating the train horn both times. The train operator did not perform the remaining 2 safety stops required by WMATA rules at 50 feet and 10 feet. At approximately 67 feet from the bump post, operating at 10 miles per hour, the train operator moved the master controller from P2 to P1 propulsion mode. Moving the master controller past P1 to B1 would have placed the train into a braking mode. After traveling another 25 feet, the train operator placed the master controller in B4 and then B5 braking mode in an attempt to slow the train. B4 and B5 modes are the highest levels of braking other than emergency braking. The train struck the bump post at 6 miles per hour. The bump post compressed as designed and prevented the train from making contact with the platform behind it. Significant damage was discovered to the rail cars involved in the collision, including coupler head damage, drawbar damage, and broken shear bolts. Shear bolts are emergency release bolts that help minimize the damage to the coupler system and reduce impact. Following the collision, blue flag protection was put in place to ensure the train remained in place. However, when Metrorail Safety Department investigators returned, that protection had been removed. This was immediately reported and the train was placed under blue flag protection until the Wmsc authorized event scene release. During an investigative interview, the train operator stated they felt out of themselves and they had believed the physical feedback of the master controller clicking into the P1 position was actually feedback that the master controller had moved to a braking position. This roughly aligns with the 7000 series railcar master controller operations, but does not match the operation of the master controller on the legacy fleet, including this 3000 series train. The collision was initially reported to the Wmsc as a minor collision. After further investigation, the event was correctly reclassified as a major collision for reporting to both the Wmsc and FTA. The second event, Whiskey 0153, involves the improper movement of a train near Twin Brook Station on November 4th, 2021. An operator moved an out-of-service train without the required permissive block. Permissive block is a section of clear track ahead of a train into which no other train, vehicle, or track obstruction is permitted. This protection was required by Metrorail rules because trucks were cut out on the train, meaning that braking functions were removed from those wheel sets. A permissive block serves as a mitigation against collision. At the time of this event, Metrorail had shut down Shady Grove and Rockville stations. This train was being moved out of service through the work zone to move these cars from Shady Grove Yard to Brentwood Yard. After arriving at Rockville Station, the ROCC controller gave the train operator a permissive block to the red signal on track 2 outside Twin Brook Station. The train operator acknowledged and repeated back the instructions. The train operator stopped as instructed at the red signal. However, when the signal changed from red to lunar, the train operator moved forward without permission from the rail traffic controller. A lunar signal is just one of the requirements to proceed safely. The train operator reported being in motion as the train crossed over from track 2 to track 1. The controller directed the train operator to stop at Twin Brook Station, where they were removed from service for post-event toxicology testing. The WMSC transmitted a draft rail operations audit to Metrorail last month for technical review. This work included assessments of training and communication. The WMSC expects to issue a final report in the coming weeks. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Key Rose. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Key Rose?
I have a question, please.
Yes, please, Commissioner Hall.
In the first incident where the operator indicated that they felt, quote, out of themselves, are we aware if there was any follow-up with that operator with regards to any personal health issues?
For the investigation, they do a fatigue assessment, and they were not determined to not be fatigued, and they had plenty of time to get sleep prior to the event. I believe that's the extent of the investigation.
So we're not aware of what the operator meant when they made that statement that they felt out of themselves?
No.
Did you mention a drug and alcohol test for that operator?
Yes.
It just seems to me to be a point that would require follow-up. By Metro.
I think it's a smart thing for us to take a look a little bit deeper into that. Not just for this investigation. It would not be my suggestion that this investigation wait for that follow-up, but Metrorail's medical surveillance of its employees and its overall fatigue and sleep disorders program were a heavy focus in our fitness for duty audit. And I think in light of those findings, it makes some sense to follow up as you're suggesting, Commissioner Hall.
Any further questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Key Rose?
I have a couple of questions, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
On the first incident, what's the criteria to go from a minor collision to a major collision? What's the criteria for that?
It would be the amount of damage. So because there was significant damage that it needed to be reclassified.
So is there a dollar amount, or is it anybody's guess? How do they do that?
Commissioner Lobby, the FTA definition is that there is required repairs before the given infrastructure or the rolling stock can be used again. So significant repairs were required for this particular consist after it made contact with the bump post. And there was damage to the bump post itself. And both of those facts in combination led to it being a accident level event.
Okay, thank you. So this train obviously needed repairs before it could continue in service. So that triggered it as more of a major collision. On the second accident, 0153, I understand that the operator, had permission to stop his train at essentially a signal that was red, and then the signal changed to a clear signal. And it's not appropriate for him to proceed on a clear signal under these circumstances. Why is that?
Right. So and that kind of we believe led to that incident. That train operators are usually, when they see that lunar signal and they have speed commands and the correct rail alignment, they're kind of programmed to move the train. In this case, there was trucks cut on the train, so it didn't have a full capability of braking. So the need to move with the permission only from the controller to make sure that there's clear track ahead in case the train is unable to stop, like a normal fully braking train would be able to stop quicker in this case than this train, because it was not operating with full braking capability. So they can only move as far as they're allowed to move with the permission from the controller, because they're verifying that there's nothing ahead of them.
So is it the controller that set the signal to clear, or is that automatically done when
other traffic, leaves the system.
Yes, the controller set the signal, and it was the intention to give the next block, but the controller, the train operator moved prematurely. So the train operator would eventually have been given a block, but they moved too soon.
Okay, so it's a little bit of a trap for the operator then, isn't it? I see you smiling. I think you agree, huh?
Yeah, I think that either way, if the controller had said, we're going to give you a block, and then the operator misinterpreted that it was a block and they moved on a red signal, that could have been a terrible thing also. So it was a matter of timing.
All right, thank you very much.
So in any event, there was a huge opportunity for confusion. So thank you, Commissioner Lobby, for raising that point. The final two reports will be delivered by Ms. Keyros and Mr. Walker. So Ms. Keyros, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Hart. The next two reports, Whiskey 0154 and Whiskey 0155, relate to evacuations for life safety reasons. The first at Dunloring Station on November 25th, 2021 was due to smoke coming from a cab heater on an Orange Line train. The second was due to a suspicious package at Pentagon Station on September 7th, 2021. Both of these are defined as accidents by the Federal Transit Administration and are program standard and therefore require investigation. In the event at Dunloring Station, the train operator reported smoke emitting from the lead car and was instructed by the rail controller to turn off the environmental system, notify customers, and offload the train. At approximately 6:59 p.m., the ROCC de-energized the rail power, and the train operator notified the controller that all riders had exited the train. At 7:08 p.m., the train operator reported the smoke had slightly dissipated and the platform was clear of customers. Metro Transit Police and the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department responded to the station. The controller instructed the train operator to take over operation of another train that was single tracking through the station during the response. At 7:24 p.m., an Office of Rail Transportation Supervisor arrived and was appointed on-scene commander by ROCC despite command previously being established by MTPD and FCFRD. An on-scene inspection determined the smoke was caused by a short in the operator's cab heater. Trip circuit breakers were also found in the cab. Post-event inspections identified a failed cab heater blower and failed contactors. The investigation determined that contrary to Metrorail requirements, Metrorail had been rebuilding these contactors. In this case, 2 contacts had been welded closed. Metrorail requires that these contactors be replaced, not rebuilt. Metrorail issued a memorandum instructing all personnel on the requirement to replace cab heater contactors. Metrorail is evaluating the appropriate inspection intervals for cab heaters and contactors. Related to the inconsistencies in incident command, Metrorail is required to address this through a corrective action plan to address finding 1 of the Emergency Management and Fire and Life Safety Programs audit that we issued last month. Mr. Walker will now summarize the investigation of the evacuation of Pentagon Station for life safety reasons on September 7th, 2021.
Thank you, Ms. Kouros. Our safety event investigation covers the emergency preparedness and response. In this case, a WMATA employee informed a Metrorail station manager of a suspicious package between the entrance to the Pentagon Station and the fare gates. This led to the evacuation of the station for life safety reasons and what initially was an appropriate response. However, during the investigation, 2 passenger trains improperly serviced the station, allowing Metrorail riders to get off those trains in an area that had been evacuated for their safety. As Pentagon Station is located where the blue and yellow lines meet in Virginia, it is the first station where outbound Blue Line trains move from OPS 2 radio channel to OPS 3 radio channel. Each radio channel relates to the specific territory covered by a single desk in the Rail Operations Control Center. In this case, OPS 3 controllers contacted the first train approaching Pentagon Station at the time of the evacuation and informed those train operators to bypass that station. The OPS 3 controller that also made general announcements that the station was closed. However, train 413 was in Ops 2 territory at the time of the general announcement at 8:21 p.m. The operator of train 413 then serviced Pentagon Station at 8:36 p.m. while the station was evacuated for life safety reasons. Ops 3 controllers continued periodic announcements, but no similar announcements were made on Ops 2. The Ops 2 controllers made one general announcement at 8:39 p.m. just after train 413 had serviced the station. About an hour later, approximately 9:31 p.m., train 404 serviced Pentagon Station while the station was evacuated for life safety reasons. The operator of train 412 traveling in the opposite direction knew the station was evacuated and reported seeing two riders on the inbound platform. The operator received permission to stop at the station to allow those riders to board the train and safely leave the station. Metrorail is directing controllers to broadcast station bypass announcements on all associated ops channels on a scheduled basis throughout an incident response. Metrorail is improving procedures related to suspicious packages response to include these announcement requirements. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Quiroz and Mr. Walker, for those presentations. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners? Okay, hearing none, we're going to look at the approval process. As I mentioned, the plan was to approve all of those investigations together, but if there is, I'll open it up to the commissioners because of the extensive discussion about several of the reports. I'll open it up to the commissioners whether they would rather do them separately or collectively. Any thoughts?
I would recommend collectively.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hall. Anybody else?
Well, Chair Hart, if on the first incident that we discussed, if I think maybe we should vote on that separately. I'm not sure, and maybe we need to have a little discussion. I'm not sure whether Washington Metro's actions were sufficient enough to handle all the different issues. Maybe they are with dismissing the individuals involved. But I think that's a discussion maybe we want to have before we vote on that particular accident.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Any other thoughts, comments? That the one you're referring to, I believe, is Whiskey 0146.
That's correct. That's the only one that there's any question on. But again, as I said, if the commissioners think that there's enough action here, that's fine. If not, I would recommend we consider, sending it back to Washington Metro to have them address these other issues that were apparent in this particular incident.
So what are the sentiments of the commissioners on separating Whiskey 0146 for the purposes of this vote? I'm going to take from the silence that this consensus is to go ahead and do it as one of along with collectively along with all of the others. Can you go with that, Commissioner Lobby? I hear what you're saying, but can you go with that?
Yeah, I can live with that.
Okay. All right. Let me get a motion on all of these 0146, 147, 148, 149, 150. 151, 152, 153, 154, and 155. Can I get a motion to approve all of those reports collectively?
I would move.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hall. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Farrar-Dyke, I appreciate that. Let me open this up to the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. And I need to hear you say it because I can't necessarily see everybody. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Commissioner Lobby is opposed. Any?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Al-Khatib is opposed.
Going with the flow here and approving.
Okay. Commissioner Al-Khatib? I'm sorry.
Approved.
Approved. Okay. So anybody opposed? Okay, so I didn't get the count. What's the count on the number of commissioners that we have now?
Chair Hart, it appears to be 6-0 and the motion carries.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, Commissioner Hart, I'm voting because Mr. Rush has apparently left the meeting.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for that reminder. We knew that he was not going to be able to stay for the entire meeting. Thank you for that. Okay, so the count is 6. Mr. Smith, his count is 6-0.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. We have one further item on, and that was a very good discussion, and I agree with Commissioner Labby that I would like to look further into the WMATA's actions regarding the various intentional wrongdoings that we saw in that first report. But
Sure.
I also agree with the sentiment to approve it collectively with the others.
We will absolutely do so, Chair Hart. While we appreciate the vote to move these investigations forward, I listened attentively to Commissioner Labby's concerns, and I'd even suggest that perhaps it would be productive if we create a follow-up opportunity for him to discuss that, maybe with certain members of the staff, and make sure that as we move forward and as we push Metro where we need to push them with regard to safety, we're doing so with his concerns and suggestions firmly in mind.
Okay, excellent. I think that's a great idea, and thank you for pursuing that.
I would welcome that. Thank you.
We now have one further item on our agenda today, and that is the election of the WMSC officers. In accordance with the WMSC compact and our bylaws, the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary treasurer are each elected by commissioners to 2-year terms, coincident terms as officers. My term as chair, Commissioner Hall's term as vice chair, and Commissioner Ferrardike's term as secretary treasurer continue through March 27th. Today's elections cover the 2-year period following the expiration of those terms beginning on March 28th. At this time, I would open the floor for nominations.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Bob.
I move that we approve the current officers for the WMSC.
Okay, thank you for that motion, Commissioner Bob. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Al-Khatib. Thank you for that. Are there any other? I think that's sufficient to take it to a vote. Is that correct? Can our counsel tell us if that's correct?
Chair Hart, just state the names of the nominees here, and then we may go to a vote.
Okay. The nominees are myself as chair, Commissioner Greg Hull as vice chair, and Commissioner Ferrardike as secretary treasurer. That's the motion. Does everybody understand that that's what they were voting on?
Yes.
Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. I believe that's all of us. Do I have that count correct, Mr. Smith?
Yes, sir. The vote is 6-0, and the slate with current officers carries.
Okay, thank you. That completes our business for today, but as a reminder, you can always report any concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. I want to thank the members of the public who attended this meeting. I also want to thank the WMSC staff for their preparation and presentations, and thanks to the commissioners for their considerable engagement. That all of those steps make this process a richer and more productive process. We expect to hold our next public meeting on April 12th, 2022. We currently anticipate that the meeting will again be held remotely via video conference, and we look forward to seeing you then. Any further business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Thank you, Ms. Commissioner Hall. Is there a second to that motion?
A second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? No objections. Hearing none, this meeting is hereby adjourned.